the weight of knot. The wind crawled low over the plains, carrying with it the dry scent of dust and mesquite, the faint whistle of a hawk above, and the heavy silence that always seemed to settle over the Fallon ranch after sunset. The horizon was still painted in orange and violet, but the light was fading fast, the kind of twilight that made every memory feel closer than it was. Elias Fallon stood at the edge of the corral, a length of rope coiled loosely in his hand, staring at the barn where the last rays of day were dying against its weathered wood. 20 years on this land, and he'd never once felt so unsure of a single decision. And all because of her. "Please," she whispered, the sound trembling in the evening air. "I am begging you. Release it." Her voice carried through the hush like a prayer. It was small but sharp, not desperate, not broken, but threaded with something that struck deeper. Trust. A trust she should never have given him. Elias didn't look at her yet. He couldn't. He only stared at the knot he had tied. A simple loop, nothing more than rope and friction, but it felt heavier than iron chains. On the other end of it, a chest-high wooden gate held firm against a restless chestnut mare, pacing, snorting, pulling at the reins that kept it tethered. The horse was hers, and so was the decision. "Clara," Elias breathed, his voice hoarse from hours of silence. "You know what happens if I let her go." Behind him, Clara Devereux stood barefoot in the dust, her hair unpinned and blowing across her face, her eyes rimmed red from crying. The daughter of the richest man in the valley didn't look like herself tonight. She wasn't the untouchable woman he'd grown up resenting from afar. She was something softer, something far more human. "I don't care," she said. "She's not meant for a life like this." Elias turned then, meeting her gaze. "Neither are you." For a heartbeat, nothing moved. The world seemed to pause. Even the wind, even the restless mare. And in that stillness, Elias felt the whole weight of the last 6 weeks crash down on him like a mountain. 6 weeks since she'd first come riding on a Fallon land uninvited. 6 weeks since she'd ignored every warning about staying away from the cattle thief's son. 6 weeks since he'd sworn he'd never let her heart break on account of him. And now here they were, standing on the edge of ruin. "She's a racehorse, Clara," Elias said quietly, gesturing toward the mare. "A prize bred to win men titles and coin. If I untie that gate and she runs, your father will burn me alive for stealing her." Clara took a step closer, her hands trembling but her voice steadier now. "He already thinks you're a thief. What's one more lie?" The jab cut deeper than she meant. Elias swallowed hard, glancing back toward the fence line where his father had once been dragged out in chains for a crime he never committed. "I swore I'd never give them another reason to hate us." "And I swore," Clara said, her breath catching as she stepped even closer, "that I'd never marry a man like Thomas Vexley." Elias's heart stopped cold. There it was, the real reason for all this. The engagement. The deal between their families. The reason Clara had been slipping away from town at sunset, meeting him where no one dared follow. "Clara," he started, but the words dried up in his throat. She shook her head, tears glistening in the last light. "They can force me into a dress. They can tie my name to his. But they can't make me love him. And they sure as hell can't make me stay." Her voice broke on that last word, and Elias felt something inside him break too. He wanted to tell her she was being foolish, that running away wasn't freedom, it was a death sentence. But the truth was he wanted it too. He wanted to saddle that mare, take her hand, and ride until the horizon swallowed them whole. Instead, he stared down at the knot. It was more than just rope and wood. It was tradition, law, the invisible line that had divided the Fallons and the Devereux for generations. Untying it meant crossing that line. Untying it meant war. "Say the word," she whispered, "and I'll leave with you tonight." Elias closed his eyes. He could still hear the voice of his father, years before the gallows took him. "Some things, boy, you can't outrun, and some things you shouldn't." He could hear his mother's voice too, frail and fading. "Don't make the same mistake we did. Don't lose everything for love." But love, real, terrifying, beautiful love, had a way of swallowing reason whole. "Do you trust me?" Elias asked, his voice barely more than a breath. Clara didn't hesitate. "With my life." The silence stretched. The horse stomped restlessly. Elias felt every heartbeat hammer in his chest as his fingers hovered over the knot. And then he froze. Because just beyond the barn, riding hard through the twilight, came the sound he'd been dreading all night. Hooves. More than one pair. Riders closing in. Clara's face paled. "They found us." Elias's pulse surged. He turned toward the sound. 4 riders, lanterns swinging from their saddles, rifles glinting in the fading light. Leading them was a man he'd hoped never to see again, Thomas Vexley himself. "Well," Thomas called out, a cruel grin slicing across his face. "Ain't this a sight? The ranch girl and the cattle thief, playing house with stolen property." Clara stepped in front of Elias, her chin lifted. "She's not stolen. She's mine." Thomas dismounted, boots crunching against the dirt as he stalked closer. "Everything you have belongs to me now, darling, including that horse." "Not yet," she spat. Thomas's gaze shifted to Elias, cold and sharp. "You planning to untie that gate, Fallon? Go on, do it. Give me a reason to put a bullet in you." The other riders laughed. 3 ranch hands loyal to the Devereux family, their hands resting casually near their holsters. Elias's fingers twitched at his own hip, but he didn't move. "Not yet. You don't have to do this," Clara whispered, gripping his arm. "We can still run." Elias looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the hope flickering in her eyes. She'd given up everything for this moment. And now, with every gun in the valley pointed their way, all she had left was his decision. He exhaled slowly. "If I do this, there's no going back." "I don't want to go back," she said. The riders were closing in. Thomas's hand hovered near his revolver. The mare stomped and snorted, sensing the tension. And then, as the wind roared through the corral and the last of the sun slipped below the earth, Elias Fallon made his choice. His fingers moved, slow, deliberate, defiant, and the knot came loose. The gate swung open. For a heartbeat, time stopped. Then the chestnut mare bolted forward in a blur of motion and dust, her hooves pounding the ground as she vanished into the wide, open prairie beyond the fence. Clara gasped. Thomas swore, and Elias just stood there, heart hammering in his chest, watching the future gallop away into the night. "You're a dead man," Thomas hissed, drawing his gun. "Maybe," Elias said, his voice steady now, "but at least I finally did something worth dying for." Clara's hand slipped into his, trembling, terrified, and unshakably certain. And as the riders closed in and the night erupted into chaos, Elias Fallon knew there was no turning back. Not from the law, not from the Devereux, not from the choice he'd just made, and certainly not from her. Hearts on a run. The gunshot cracked through the night like a hammer striking steel. Elias felt the bullet whistle past his ear, close enough to tug at a lock of hair, before burying itself into the barn door behind him. Clara screamed, but Elias didn't flinch. He had no time to. "Run," he shouted, yanking her hand and pulling her toward the gate. Thomas fired again, cursing as the revolver bucked in his hand. The shot went wide this time. Elias was already moving, boots pounding against the dust, Clara stumbling but keeping pace beside him. They vaulted the fence, hit the open range, and didn't dare look back. The prairie at night was an ocean of black and silver. The moon was a pale lantern above them, just enough light to run by, but not enough to see where safety lay. All Elias knew was that they had to keep moving, and that stopping meant death. "Where are we going?" Clara gasped, her breath sharp and ragged. "West," Elias said. "The canyon. If we can reach the river crossing before sunrise, they'll lose our trail." "What about the horse?" "She's gone." His chest heaved with every word. "And that's the point." Behind them, the sound of hooves rose again. Closer now, furious, relentless. They had minutes, maybe less, before Thomas and his men closed the gap. Elias didn't need to turn to know the kind of rage that was coming. He'd seen that look in Thomas's eyes before. The look of a man who'd rather burn the world than lose a fight. The ground grew rough beneath their boots, sagebrush tearing at their legs, rocks shifting underfoot. Clara stumbled once, twice, before Elias swept her up onto his back without a word. She protested weakly, but he didn't listen. He needed speed more than pride now. "You should have left me," she whispered into his shoulder. "I tried," he said. "You didn't let me." They pushed on through the darkness until the shouts behind them grew clearer. "There! They're on foot! Cut them off before the ridge." Elias cursed under his breath. If they reached the ridge first, the riders would box them in. And out here, boxed and meant buried in an unmarked grave. A glint of silver caught his eye, a stream cutting through the plain less than 100 yards ahead. If they followed it, it would lead straight into the canyon. "This way," he said, setting Clara down and grabbing her hand again. The ground sloped downward now, the earth giving way to stone and gravel as the canyon walls loomed ahead. The sound of water grew louder, crashing against rocks in a narrow pass. They were close, so close, when Clara stumbled again, this time harder. Elias spun, catching her before she hit the ground. "I'm slowing you down," she panted. "Go without me." "Not a chance," Elias growled. Her legs trembled, breath shallow and uneven. She'd never run this far in her life, not in silk dresses and ballroom slippers. But still, she pushed forward, clinging to his arm as they stumbled into the canyon shadow. The riders reached the ridge moments later. Elias heard their horses snorting above, the scrape of hooves on stone as they searched the canyon mouth. "Fallon," Thomas's voice thundered through the night. "You think you can hide? I'll hunt you to the ends of the earth." Elias pulled Clara into the darkness beneath an overhang, pressing a finger to her lips. They crouched in silence, hearts pounding as the rider's lantern swung above them, beams of yellow light slicing through the night. "Spread out," Thomas ordered. "We'll flush them out like rats." The search began. They moved slow, methodical, their boots grinding against loose stone. Elias knew they wouldn't stay hidden for long, not with Thomas leading the hunt. He'd been tracking men since he was 15, and he'd never lost a trail. Clara clutched Elias's hand tighter. "What now? Now?" he whispered. "We stop running." She blinked at him in confusion, but Elias's gaze was steady. He'd spent his whole life running. From the law, from the Fallon's name, from the hate that followed him wherever he went. But he wasn't running anymore. Not from this. Not from her. "Stay low," he murmured, rising to his feet. "What are you doing?" she hissed. "Evening the odds." Elias crept along the canyon wall, keeping to the shadows. The nearest rider, a hulking ranch hand with a lantern, was only 20 feet away. Elias waited until the man turned his back, then lunged. The lantern shattered on the rocks, plunging them into darkness. Before the man could shout, Elias tackled him hard, driving his shoulder into the man's gut. They hit the ground in a struggle of fists and curses. The ranch hand swung wildly, but Elias drove his elbow into the man's jaw, knocking him cold. The sound drew the others. "Over there. Fallon's here." Gunfire erupted. Bullets sparked against the canyon walls as Elias dove for cover, grabbing the fallen man's revolver. He returned fire, each shot echoing like thunder in the narrow pass. Clara crouched behind a boulder, her heart hammering against her ribs. She hated the violence, hated the blood and the noise, but more than anything, she hated how terrified she was of losing him. Every time a bullet cracked the air, she flinched. Every time his silhouette moved through the dark, she prayed. Thomas's voice cut through the chaos. "Enough playing games." Elias barely had time to react before Thomas stepped into view, rifle raised, lantern light flickering across his furious face. His shot rang out, and Elias felt the searing pain tear across his shoulder. He hit the ground hard, the revolver tumbling from his grip. Blood soaked through his sleeve. Clara screamed his name and ran toward him, but Thomas was faster. In 2 strides, he was on them, the barrel of his rifle leveled at Elias's chest. "It ends here," Thomas hissed. "You stole my horse. You stole my woman. Now I'm taking back what's mine." Clara stepped between them, tears streaking her dust-stained face. "I was never yours, Thomas. Not for a second." Thomas's jaw clenched. "Move aside, Clara." "No, I'll shoot through you if I have to." "Then you'll have to," she said, voice trembling but unyielding. For a long moment, no one moved. The canyon was silent except for the rush of water and Elias's ragged breathing. Thomas's finger tightened on the trigger, and then, somewhere behind him, came the sharp click of a hammer cocking. "Drop the gun." The voice was low, cold, and unmistakable. Sheriff Harlan stepped into the lantern light, 6 deputies behind him, rifles drawn and aimed. Thomas's face twisted in rage. "Sheriff, this is none of your—" "Drop it," Harlan repeated, "or I'll drop you." Slowly, Thomas lowered the rifle, his eyes burning holes into Elias. "You think this is over?" he spat. "You're a dead man walking, Fallon." Elias, still bleeding but alive, managed a faint, bitter smile. "Maybe, but at least I'm walking with her." Dawn broke soft and golden over the canyon, painting the rocks in warm hues as the sheriff's men led Thomas and his riders back toward town in shackles. Elias sat against the canyon wall, Clara beside him, gently tying a strip of cloth around his shoulder. "You're lucky," she whispered. "It missed anything vital." "Luck's never been my strong suit," he muttered. She smiled faintly. "Maybe it's changing." They sat in silence for a while, watching the sky brighten over the desert. For the first time since the night began, there was peace, not the fragile kind, but the real kind, the kind that came after choices you couldn't take back. "What happens now?" Clara asked softly. Elias exhaled, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "I don't know. The Devereux will hate me. Half the valley will want me dead. And me?" He turned to her, his eyes softer than she'd ever seen them. "They'll hate you too." Clara's smile widened. "Then I suppose we're in this together." A laugh escaped him, the first genuine laugh he'd had in months. "Yeah, I suppose we are." She leaned her head against his shoulder, and for a long time they just sat there, two broken pieces finally fitting together. Whatever future lay ahead, the law, the judgment, the endless frontier, they'd face it side by side. The sound of hooves echoed faintly in the distance. A horse, her horse, was trotting back toward them from the prairie, untethered, unbroken, and free. Clara rose to meet her, stroking the mare's mane as if greeting an old friend. "She came back," she whispered, "because she knew where she belonged," Elias said. Clara turned, sunlight catching the gold in her hair, and smiled. Not the polite smile of a society girl, but something real, something wild. "So did I." Elias pushed himself to his feet, pain still flaring in his shoulder, but a different warmth settling in his chest. He took her hand, and together they climbed into the saddle. The sun rose higher, washing the plains in light. Ahead of them lay miles of unknown land, new towns, new names, new beginnings. The past would hunt them, yes. The future would test them, but for the first time, neither of them was afraid. "Ready?" Elias asked. Clara glanced back once at the canyon behind them, at the life they were leaving behind, then faced forward with a steady gaze. More than ever, with a soft nudge of his heel, the mare surged forward, hooves pounding against the open earth. And as the Fallon ranch faded into the distance, Elias and Clara rode into the endless horizon, two souls bound by love, defiance, and the simple, beautiful truth that some knots are meant to be untied.